All right, we're wrapping up. We have a little bit more. Stay with me. Okay, we have 2 more learning objectives, but I want you to know as we wrap this up that we can be good communicators and create spaces where people feel safe to be honest, and that begins with us using confirming messages in our everyday language. Confirming and disconfirming messages are some research created by a theorist named Gibbs, who created this thing called a supportive climate or a not supportive climate. Confirming messages lead to a supportive climate. Non-confirming or disconfirming lead to a not supportive climate. So, not rocket science. Here's what I want you to hear. Confirming messages, confirming language says, I value you. Disconfirming messages say, I don't value you. Now, I know you're going to say, that's not what I meant, but that is what's going to get heard. So I want to give you a couple examples that when I teach people how to be more confirming in their language, we want everything we do to say, I value you as a person. So you need to know, and if you're taking notes, confirming messages do a couple things. They affirm the other person. They say, I affirm you. I value you. We are created to need that from other human beings. Number 2, they show agreement. So they say, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm on your team, right? Now, disconfirming. One word that you need to write down in your notes, devalues. Disconfirming devalues. It says, you may be critical of the person's activity, but what they hear is, you don't care about me. And we cannot communicate with people if they don't believe we care about them, not in an effective way that leads to connection. So let me give you a couple examples. Instead of you coming home and they've rearranged the furniture, unloaded the dishwasher, or maybe you're working in a group project with someone and you go, I would not have done it that way. You need to know that that's a disconfirming message. That does not affirm them in any way. Instead, I want you to change your language, change your tone, and say, hey, help me understand why you took that approach. I care about you. Help me understand why you're doing it this way, right? How did we get here? And I'm going to maintain a tone and language that stays curious, which continues to make you feel like I'm interested or have an affinity or liking for you. Okay, number 2, let's say something bad happens. You worked really hard on a project. I think if you look at a toddler and you go, they built this tower and then their brother knocked it over or their sister knocked it over. Or they worked really hard on writing a paper and the computer deleted it, right? So that happens sometimes. And you could come in and go, sometimes things don't work out. It is what it is. Maybe your mentality isn't, I'm trying to make you tougher. Life happens. Stuff happens. What are you going to do? That doesn't confirm or affirm or value the other person. One of the things I cannot stress enough is when people have healthy relationships, how they talk to each other matters so very much. So I want you to try this. Something happens. They wrote a paper, it got deleted. Lead with, I'm really sorry that happened. I know you put a lot of time into that. I'm really sorry that your friend is sick. I know they mean a lot to you. I'm sorry you lost your job. I know that was a really important thing to you. We want to affirm, we want to value, we want to create connection because it will lead to healthier communication. I want to go to this last piece of positive and negative relational spirals. If you're human, you're alive, and you've interacted with people for any amount of time, you know that relationships can be a roller coaster, ups, downs, lots of twists and turns. So we want to understand that there are positive and negative relational spirals that happen. We understand that when you're communicating with other people, sometimes there's escalation that happens. We can get really excited and jump up and down and send friends that GIF that has the friends, girls screaming and jumping up and down, or it can escalate into conflict or to anger. It can escalate into sadness. When we're dealing with conflict, we want to avoid this spiral. We want to make sure that we're not falling into this trap where we're going down a rabbit hole of sort of anger or rehearsing all the terrible things. We want to Make sure we're not choosing avoidance in the spiral, that we're what Gottman and conflict research would call stonewalling someone else. So we want to be careful in this process of positive and negative relational spirals, which can happen. We need to understand that escalation is possible and that oftentimes it's probable, right? But when we're dealing with conflict, especially, we don't want to let that take over. We want to be able to step back. And finally, we need to be careful choosing avoidance. The silent treatment's a pretty common thing in relationships. It happens. But we want to be careful that we don't do that in a way that shuts off the other person completely in the middle of a relational spiral. All right, this was a big chapter. The research says that if we have healthy interpersonal relationships, not 72, not even 17, just a couple, it will lower our risk of heart disease and cancer. We will actually live, the number is 2.3 years longer. But not just that we would live longer, we would live healthier lives. We want to continue to be good at building and growing and maintaining interpersonal relationships. I hope you've enjoyed this chapter as much as I have, and I hope that you can say at the end of this that you have some tools in your toolbox for making your interpersonal relationships a little bit more effective.